Hey, hello everyone. Hi Mandy.
I
We have officially 20 seconds to go, I think. Yes, welcome everybody to the second Private University Ranking ASEAN Information session. Don't worry, this session will be recorded and we will also share the slides, so you don't have to take notes like crazy. Yeah, and please ask questions in the chat or do raise hand and we can maybe get to your questions as well. Yeah, Mandy, go ahead with your introduction.
okay. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the info session of the AppliedHE Private University Ranking ASEAN. It's good to see so many old friends and new ones as well, albeit virtually, and I hope to see all of you in person very soon in the near future. For those whom I've not met, my name is Mandy Mock, and I'm the founder and CEO of AppliedHE. AppliedHE is a new higher education evaluation and branding agency, which I founded in 2020 after an almost 20-year career at QS. I left QS with the aim of creating an alternative solution in ranking, rating, and branding that better serves the need of more learning and employability-focused applied universities, which I believe are dominant in the ASEAN region, in fact, all over the world. Which is the reason why we're now bringing the global limelight to shine on the private universities in the ASEAN region. The AppliedHE Private University Ranking ASEAN has two main goals. On the one hand, we want to highlight the strength and achievements of private universities in the ASEAN region. And on the other hand, the ranking aims to provide students, parents, employers, and other stakeholders with a reliable and relevant benchmark against which universities can be compared. This is the first ranking of ASEAN universities carried out by an organization from Southeast Asia. This home advantage makes us more alert and more responsive of the local higher education landscape. Higher education in Southeast Asia is mainly aimed at training, developing the human resources needed for fast-changing economies. And although there are a number of research-intensive universities in Southeast Asia that have climbed the global rankings, average research expenditure in Southeast Asia is still relatively low. As a result, the quality of teaching and learning and employability are most relevant to the majority of universities in this region. While research also plays an important role, with the exception of a few public universities, most universities in Southeast Asia have very modest research footprints. And so for that reason, it does not make sense to put research center stage in an ASEAN-focused ranking. We also hope that an ASEAN ranking will bring Southeast Asia closer together. During the past decades, we have seen that private sector initiatives have brought this region closer together, with governments often following their lead. We've seen the emergence of pan-ASEAN brands such as Grab, Shopee, or AirAsia, which have transformed lives and created a sense of a united ASEAN. So we hope that by having an ASEAN-centered university ranking, we can achieve a kind of ASEAN consciousness in the higher education space. Another important distinction is our focus on private universities. Private higher education providers in Southeast Asia are often more nimble, more outward-looking, and more innovative than their public sector counterparts. They also have completely different funding models and missions, making a comparison of public and private universities in the same ranking awkward, if not unfair. So, what is the expectation of the outcomes of this ranking? At a policy level, we hope our rankings will spark discussions about how the private higher education sector of the different ASEAN countries can develop further. But more importantly, at an individual level, we believe that our rankings can change the perception of students and parents. If you look at most university rankings today, they are dominated by North American, European, and some highly developed Asian economies. It's therefore no wonder that ambitious young students aim for those universities, resulting in a brain drain in their own country. But an ASEAN ranking can highlight excellence here in our region. Why shouldn't a Vietnamese student choose a leading Philippine or Malaysian university to gain experience in an English-speaking country? Why shouldn't an Indonesian student consider a degree in Thailand or Cambodia and discover new cultures and languages along the way? Stimulating this kind of student mobility changes lives, and if our rankings can contribute to that, it's already a great contribution. But even locally, these rankings are valuable, especially for private universities, which typically have limited research budgets and therefore don't feature in any international rankings. The AppliedHE Private University Ranking ASEAN makes your institution much more visible to your stakeholders. And for institutions that are already ranked elsewhere, taking part in the AppliedHE Private University Ranking simply adds another feather in your cap. So if you perform well, it's another cycle of media attention, new talking points, and new superlatives. The AppliedHE Private University Ranking ASEAN, therefore, represents a huge opportunity for the sector, and it's one that we hope you will all seize. Let's all unite and bring Southeast Asia closer together. It is now my pleasure to hand the stage over to our head analyst, Mr. Peter Stack, for a complete briefing and methodology of the AppliedHE Private University Ranking ASEAN. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mandy, for that great introduction. Now let me see if we can share screen, and then we're off to a start. Okay, yes, here it is, our logo. So yes, this is the AppliedHE Private University Ranking ASEAN. So if you're not a private university or you're not located in ASEAN, unfortunately, you cannot participate in this ranking, but I'm sure we will try and include you in another ranking in the near future. I'll give a quick introduction about the AppliedHE way of thinking about rankings. Then I'll talk about the criteria, or rather the indicators, the data that we use, and the ranking timeline. I'll talk a little bit about the promotional strategy, and I'll also talk a little bit about rankings and ratings and how they fit together, because AppliedHE also do ratings. And specifically, our job ready rating has some overlap with the ranking. And then finally, in the closing, I'll also try and do a very quick demonstration of how you can submit data so that you've seen it once before, and maybe that lowers the barrier, and maybe also answer some questions if we run through it quickly. The question that we're basically trying to answer with any ranking is what makes a university good? And that is, of course, a question that differs depending on who you ask. Even if you ask, let's say, a student, they might all have different ideas. They might be thinking about sustainability and community, or they might be thinking more about internationalization, studying in English, or about knowledge and skills, lifelong learning, you name it. So there's always going to be different ideas. Different universities are going to be conceived of as being good for different people. But what it comes down to, if you're a university leader, if you're a decision maker, is which evaluation tools fit with the values that you hold for your institution. So if you're a very research intensive institution, obviously you should look at a ranking which values that. If you're a very teaching focused institution, then perhaps a more teaching orientated ranking is more suitable. And that's a decision you need to make as a higher education leader. Now, we at AppliedHE, this is actually the second ranking that we're producing. The first one was Rankometer, which we did at the beginning of this year, where we mixed 5 leading university rankings together, and we're planning a second edition on it, which will be a bit different. But basically, we're remixing people's data to produce a ranking. But what I'm talking about today, and which is hopefully much more substantive, is the AppliedHE Private University Ranking ASEAN, where we really try to have new sets of data, new institutions included that are currently not in any international ranking. And of course, the focus on ASEAN and private institutions. Now, the ranking is not that we produce is not a one-person show. We have a ranking advisory board from around the region. It's currently chaired by Dr. Kevin Downing from the City University of Hong Kong. The ranking advisory board is independent of AppliedHE. That means that they advise us on how we should be doing our rankings, but we don't always listen to them and vice versa. So they do advise, they do have their own independent opinion, but they're not in control of the whole ranking process. But they do hopefully ask all the tough and difficult questions before we put out a ranking, and they give us a lot of advice. So we're incredibly happy to have them and thank them for the time that they put in. Now, talking about the criteria, the data, and the timeline. The first thing to perhaps look at is the criteria or the indicators. Now, what do we look at in an AppliedHE ranking? First and foremost, we look at teaching and learning. Second, we look at employability. Next is research. Then there's community outreach, internationalization, and institutional reputation. So those 6 indicators of what we look at, and that's also the case here for the private university ranking ASEAN. Now, depending on the ranking that we're producing, we may have slightly different weightages. So for this particular ranking, for the private university ranking, 40% of the ranking grade is for teaching and learning. 15% is in for employability. So clearly we feel that, look, if it's a private university, the quality of teaching and learning and people getting a job, those are the main reasons why students attend. Next comes research, then it's community outreach, internationalization, and institutional reputation. So this is kind of the order of importance. Now, the ranking data that we have, for the teaching and learning, we use student surveys. So we have an online student survey system, which is GDPR or PDP compliant. So you're not asked to send us any data. Instead, we will issue you with a survey link, and approximately 10% of your student body should respond to that survey. So that's the first big part of data collecting. So once you've decided that you want to participate in our ranking, we will send you the survey link and you need to send it out to your student body. The second part is bibliometrics, and here we've made the choice to use the Google Scholar database, and that's a very important choice because Google Scholar is a much broader database than, let's say, Scopus or Web of Science, which only look kind of at the top end of all of the scientific journals. Google Scholar indexes a lot of publications from ASEAN. So you see, for instance, that a lot of private universities in countries like Indonesia, Philippines, even Malaysia, they run journals, these universities, but they're not Scopus indexed or anything like that, but they are Google Scholar indexed. So the output that is collected in those journals, we also capture. Of course, we look at citation rates and whatnot, but we have a much bigger, broader net that we do to catch the research data, and we believe that that benefits ASEAN universities, especially private universities. Then the third part that we look at is institutional data. So we ask institutions to submit some of their data, and we carry out an interval sampling audit. Now, what is an interval sampling audit? It means that every institution that submits data, we reserve the right to come back to you to ask you to verify the data. So if you claim that you have 100% employability, for example, we will ask you for evidence of that, documentary evidence of that. If you say all your students go and study abroad, we will ask you where they went, who they are, and this kind of information. But it is a sampling audit, so we will ask some institutions, we will not ask others. It's the first time we're doing it, so we need to get used to this process. But we're also the first agency, as far as we're aware of, that actually does this. So many ranking agencies request institutions submit data, but they don't actually audit it. We do this kind of auditing. So this, again, to improve trust in the rankings and the results that they produce. Now, if you look at the percentages, the student survey is about 49% of our ranking. So it's a very big part. Now you might say, well, student survey, isn't that very big as a percentage? Well, if you go to the UK or the Netherlands, for instance, they have a national student survey, which is incredibly influential, and that's 100% of the quote unquote rankings that they do. So having 50% we think is a perfectly appropriate weighting. And then next comes institutional data at about 28%, bibliometrics at about 13%, and then reputation. And the reputation is done in a way that institutions can nominate each other. So if you participate in our ranking, you can nominate other private institutions in ASEAN. You can nominate 5 institutions from your own country and 5 institutions from other countries, up to 5 institutions. Then the ranking timeline. We have basically right now we're doing promotion. We're telling private universities in ASEAN about the project, and you can submit data. That's the month of September, which is already passed, and now October. The online survey period is roughly in November, and the ranking compilation and audit we intend to do in December. And we hope to publish the rankings sometime in January, but it is possible that this is a little bit later. We need to see how many of you respond and how smoothly this whole process goes. But for us, quality comes first. If we have to publish it 2 weeks later, we will do that. Then a bit more detailed timeline. So today is October 7th. It's our second ranking info session, which is actually in the afternoon, so there's a typo there. Then the registration deadline for universities is 15th of October. Now, we also have a second deadline here on the 31st of October, but basically by the 15th of October, we can guarantee you that we'll be able to give you timely feedback on the results. If there's some problems there, we have some time to get back to you. We will be able to get the survey link out to you on time, etc. But if for whatever reason we do know that there's Corona, many universities are still work from home in different countries in ASEAN, so it can be a challenge to get that data. So we kind of have a grace period of 2 weeks until 31st October. So we highly, highly encourage you to submit data by next week, 15th of October, but if you need a bit more time, we will accommodate that. Then starting November 1st, we hope to start the AppliedHE student survey, and we hope to end that around November 30th. And again, we have a 2-week grace period for that. Also in December, we will start to begin auditing the rankings, the ranking data that you've submitted, and we hope to finalize that whole process sometime in January so that by February we can really publish. So this is the timeline that we're working for this first edition of the ASEAN Private University Rankings. Now that was a little bit the technical part. Now a little bit the promotional strategy that comes with it, because we do realize that, yes, you invest some time in putting this in, but we think the investment that you make and giving out the service, etc., far, far, far outweighs everything in terms of promotion that you will get back for it. So the things that will be part of this whole ranking exercise, first of all, there will be an AppliedHE ranking microsite where all the information will be neatly collected. There will be a rankings launch event. Right now, it looks like that will be another online event, but you never know, there might be a physical one. We have an AppliedHE ranking showcase book that we're planning to produce, which is a publication that again compiles all the ranking information, also a bit of information about the universities, etc. We're planning a campaign of media exposure, of outreach to various media organizations in countries to see if we can get that out. And we're also working on media partnerships to see if we can do an early release or an exclusive release to certain influential media to really kind of boost up this kind of ranking impact also in the local media scene. So yeah, we put a lot of work in getting the data right, getting the results right, but we also put a lot of work in the promotional activities, because there's no point doing all this work and then not telling anybody about it. So just that you're aware of that it's going on. We also provide you with a bunch of promotional materials. Sorry, this is for the ratings that we do, but you'll have something similar for a ranking. So there'll be a ranking badge, there'll be a ranking certificate, there'll be a ranking report, which contains information about the student surveys that we've run, about the Google Scholar bibliometric data that we've collected for you. Of course, the microsite on AppliedHE.com, of course, news releases on our own newswire, which are indexed by Google News. So there's a whole host of in-house promotional materials that this generates as well. And then the final point that I'd like to make, in addition to this promotional material, we also give you a lot of data. So we will give you the performance of your institution specified for each indicator specifically so that you can really use it. We will give you a report that lets you benchmark against the peer group so that you can see where do you stand against other universities in ASEAN. So we will not share with you how you stand exactly compared to another university, but we'll give you a broad overview. So are you in the top 10%, or are you kind of mid-range, or are you a little bit at the bottom for each indicator? Also stakeholder perception and where those stakeholders are coming from. So this mainly relates to student surveys, and anonymized raw data is available if you want to do your internal analysis. So yeah, the saying often goes, data is the new gold. That's very true, and we try and supply you here too. So all the data you give us, we give you something back. That's our starting point. Now, of course, the question about our ratings, right? Yeah, we're talking about the ranking, but there's also the rating. The ranking essentially is a tool to assess your global standing, and the rating is designed to figure out your local standing amongst local stakeholders. So that's our job-ready rating. So there is some similarity in criteria. But so for the rankings, we look at teaching and learning, employability, research, community engagement, internationalization, and institutional reputation. For the rating, we have a much, much broader perspective. So if you decide to do the ranking and the rating, the good news is that you won't have to run separate surveys for students. So if you do the rating, we can take data from there and use it for the ranking. So that's a very valuable time-saving step. So if you were thinking of doing the rating, that's great. Then please do then you can do the rating now, and you can do the ranking at the same time. If you decide to do the rating later, you need to rerun some of the surveys, unfortunately. So for the ratings, we also look at the faculty profile, industry exposure. In terms of employability, we look at graduate competence, remuneration, entrepreneurship. We look specifically at applied research. We also look at inclusiveness and access. We look at intercultural competence, and we look at stakeholder perceptions. The rating, we believe, is very relevant because it's focused on career, learning, community, and industry collaboration. Also, non-universities can do the rating. So the ranking is only open to universities, but this rating is not. It's also open to other institutions. And the rating is by employment cluster. So the ranking is for your entire institution. And the rating, we divide it into 22 employment clusters, which is a kind of subject area, but more focused on industries. Now, here are the rating criteria again. And they are mapped against the Sustainable Development Goals. So you can also use it as a tool to evaluate your SDG readiness and whatnot. So that's an additional benefit of doing the ratings. It's all not part of the rankings. So if SDGs is something that's driving your institution, then the rating may be very interesting as well. So these are the employment clusters. So there's 22. Basically related to industries. And the reason we do that is because employers and students tend to first choose what they want to do, where they want to work in, and then they choose the university. So doing a rating based on industry cluster or employment cluster makes a lot of sense. And the ratings, they also include a student survey, but they also have a faculty survey, alumni survey, and institutional data. Now, these are some of the demo surveys that you can look at, but in a moment, I'll also show you the data submission. But you can have a look at the demo surveys as well, if you just want to know what they are like. Okay, now we come to the closing. So the question of why you should join the AppliedHE University Ranking ASEAN. Well, first of all, to note is it's voluntary, right? We don't rank you against your will. We need your buy-in. We believe you should do it because the criteria and the indicators are more relevant, as are the ratings, especially for private universities. It's an opportunity to do peer benchmarking to see where you stand at a kind of pan-ASEAN level. The saying often goes, if you're ranked, you exist, which is a bit cynical, but the point here to say is that you never really lose by being in a ranking, even if you don't rank number 1 or number 2. Often based on the criteria or based on geography, you can carve up the ranking in many ways, and many students look at rankings, and so you and also other stakeholders. So just being in the ranking shows that you're serious. And finally, there is no charge. We know that many private universities have suffered a bit because of the whole COVID crisis, have had to reinvent some things. So it's always good to know that you can do this exercise at no charge. Then we also want your support. So we're still looking for survey translation. We've been in discussion with people to help us with Khmer and Tagalog translation. We offer English, Indonesian, Thai, and Vietnamese standard. But if you feel that for your institution, maybe translating to Bahasa Malaysia or Chinese would be very useful, or another local language, then please reach out to us, send us an email. And we'd like to be in touch with you, because we can offer our surveys in your local language, and that might help you improve the response rate, because you need to get 10%. If you get below 5%, you get no points for the student survey. So that would be very much a pity. So the target of 10% is there. Also, if you could help us with outreach. So if you can forward your information to colleagues, we've been in touch with MAPCO in Malaysia, with AppliedHE in Thailand, with PAKUKO in the Philippines. But if you have groups of organizations or chat groups that would be useful, then please share that. Then also your own questions and suggestions, if you have those, please share those with us, because the sooner we have that, we're still adapting, we're still learning how to do this. It's the first time we're doing it. Of course, we've talked to a lot of people, but we're still very open to your feedback. And the final point is sponsorships and the job ready rating. So there is a sponsorship available. You can advertise with us. So basically, if you think, okay, well, great, we've done this whole exercise now, it basically amplifies your exposure. And there's also an opportunity to do the job ready rating with the ranking surveys, which basically let you kill 2 birds with 1 stone. And it's at a preferential price for ASEAN private universities only. So if you're interested in that, that's also an option. Now, this is our email address. So if you have any questions, you can write to ranking@appliedhe.org. And what I'm going to do now, before we open to questions, is give you a quick demo of how all of this looks like. So this is the first thing that I want to show you. This is appliedhe.org/ranking-reg. So this is kind of the website where you can find all the information. To register for the ranking, you can just click here. So you click here, it's already there. But normally, if you're not logged in, you just leave your email address. We send you an email address with the link, and that's it. So here's the eligibility criteria, what you should do to take part, the institutional data that we ask from you, the terms and conditions of taking part in the rating. And here's also further information. So the ranking brochure is here, which includes sponsorship options. There's the methodology, which is a more technical explanation. We've got a future group where you can post questions and get answers. So this is on our social media platform. And of course, there are info sessions like this, of which you can also find a recording. Now, once you've registered, you go here, which is the data submission platform. So yeah, you read the terms and conditions and you proceed. Oh, why is it not going to the next page? Yeah, and then you select your institution. So I'm just selecting a university here. If your institution is not there, please contact us right away. It could mean that your institution just doesn't fall within our ranking universe, but if you believe you are a private university in ASEAN, please contact us right away and just write to ranking@appliedhe.com. So you can type your information here. You can upload your logo. We use this logo in our surveys, or not just the job ready surveys, in all surveys, reports and publications, and you can provide in a description, of course longer than this. Then you need to provide some institutional data. So number one, we retain the right to audit your data. And number two, you need to provide documentary proof. So here you can provide the number of faculty. I'm just going to fill out some random number. Oh, why doesn't this work? Oh, it is working. It just types on the other side. See, I don't even know my own program. So these are just, you need to do the correct numbers, right? So important to note here is that we ask for the full-time equivalents, where 2 part-time equals 1 full-time. That's just our counting rule. And for international students, we count students who have foreign citizenship or who have participated in an exchange program or a virtual exchange program and received credit from an academic from a partner institution. Now, this is very important. This is the recent outcomes from the graduating class. So how many people graduated, and then how many got a job within 6 months or went on to pursue further studies, or who didn't respond to the survey. Those are the details we ask for now. If you do not have that data, and we found that's the case, then we will provide you with an additional survey link. So we're working to resolve that now. Our expectation was actually that most universities have a tracer study, an up-to-date tracer study, but quite a few have come back to us now so far saying that they have not. So that's a challenge that we're resolving, because otherwise we cannot really say anything useful about employability. Now here we ask you to fill in the web domain of your university. So something like this, the official web domain. So we use that to track the faculty email in Google Scholar. And we, so that's that. We also encourage you to send us some alternative names of your university in different languages so that we can track them, their news impact, which is one of our criteria. And if you have your official Google Scholar profile of your institution, we advise you to put that in, because that makes it much easier for us to retrieve all the papers that your institution is producing from Google Scholar. Otherwise, we use the email address. Okay. And finally, you can nominate the peer institutions. So those are other institutions which you respect. You can have a chat with your main faculty members about that. So you can select up to 5 institutions in your own country. Do not select your own institution, because that's a spoiled vote. And do not select the same institution. You can't vote for, let's say, Sunway University 10 times. You can only vote for them once, and then you have to pick another institution. And then you press submit, and then you're done. And then in a few days after you've submitted, after 15 October, we start following up with you and sending you the survey links. So that's really how it works. Yeah, not terribly difficult, I hope. And as mentioned, if you don't have a tracer study, reach out to us. We will send you a link to do a very simple tracer study. So that's links that you can send out to alumni. Because we've come to realize that that's an issue. I see there's Q&A, and I'm now going to go through that. Okay, there's a question from Sargunam who's asking about the nomination of peer institutions. You can nominate any peer institution that you like. That's on the list, right? It has to be another private university in ASEAN. We do this in a sense because it is a kind of an external validation of how respected an institution is. Who are the institutions in your own market that you respect and look up to, and who are the institutions in other ASEAN markets that you look at? And I think that's a discussion. Whoever is filling out the survey, they ultimately, or who's submitting the data, they have ultimate control. But I can imagine that's something that you discuss with some colleagues and then come up with your top 10 list, and that's it. The next question is from an anonymous attendee. What if the institution doesn't have Google Scholar? Every institution, it's possible that you don't have a Google Scholar profile. And in that case, you could possibly reach out to the local Google office in your country. I don't know exactly how that works, but if your institution uses an institutional email address for your academics, we can track it that way. And usually all the profiles that are attached in Google Scholar, they use the verified email address from your institution. So let's say I have at sunway.edu.my or at taylors.edu.my or whatever miu.edu.my email, then that is what Google Scholar will use to verify that the academic belongs to your institution. And so that's what we use as well. So if you don't have the Google Scholar profile, we use your institutional email address to track that. Now, if you don't have an institutional email address, you have a problem, right? I'll admit that. There's only so much we can do. But if you have the institutional email address, it should be no problem getting your info from Google Scholar. Is there a deadline for the rating? Well, you need to submit us the information at the absolute latest by October 31st for the ranking. That is absolute latest October 31st. If you want to do the rating with the ranking, please get in touch with us as soon as possible, because then we can align the execution of the rating and the ranking alongside. Even if you haven't quite signed all the documentation for the rating, if you know that you're going to do it, I can probably already let you run some rating surveys pending the signing of documentation, as long as we know that you're planning to do the rating before October 31st. Then there's a question about graduates is only from 2020. Yeah, we can look at the last 3 years, so 2021, 2020, 2019, and we hope that you provide us with the most recent data. Also because of COVID, it's a little bit complex. I realize that. So please, if you have a tracer study from the last 3 years, please provide us with that. If you don't have an up-to-date tracer study, then we will give you a link to send out to your faculty. And again, the sooner you upload the tracer study, the better, because we'll have a look at it quickly. And if we see there's a problem with it, that it doesn't really give us the information we need, we will come back to you and ask you to run our mini kind of tracer study on your alumni anyway. So that's very important. Yeah, it's again, this whole employability is an experiment. We feel it's very important, but we need to have reliable data that compares well across different ASEAN regions. So that's the reason why we're very insistent on this. Here's a question from Miguel Carpio from Jose Rizal University. For the student survey, what's the percentage of the student population that needs to be surveyed? It's not the graduating batch. It's in principle, it's the whole student population that you have enrolled, and we are looking for 10% or more. If it is below 10%, we start to deduct a little bit, and 5% is the minimum threshold. So we highly encourage you to get at least 10% responses. We've had experience doing ratings, has not been a problem. We've gotten our 10%, no problem. So typically what the strategy is that universities follow is we give you a link. It's very easy. It's appliedhe.org/ usually the name of your university. And that link you can post on social media, on wherever you want to put it, on WhatsApp groups, on the university homepage, on wherever you want to put it. And students go to that. Again, they verify their email address and then they fill out the survey. It takes 5 minutes of their time. It's very mobile friendly. So we've noticed that more than 50% of students actually complete the survey, do so on mobile. And I think that's partly that helps with the response rates. But yeah, it's minimum 5%, and 10% or more is good. Then Limhok An's question, what is the limit of number of universities to be ranked? I mean, the more the merrier. We don't have a limit. If we're overwhelmed and we have like 100+ universities, we might take a few weeks longer to produce data. But in our view, it's a happy problem. Yeah, we especially in this case, we try to do it. How to say? We try to rank as many universities as we can in the beginning. Anonymous attendee asked, there is commercial right for rating. For rating, you have to pay. Yes, rating is a paid product. And I think for ASEAN private universities, it's $15,000 for 3 years, and you get all sorts of promotional activities and data, etc., etc. But the ranking is not. Participating in the ranking is free of charge. But you can take up a sponsorship. Now, if you do the sponsorship, it has no influence on your ranking results. So I just want to make that very clear. It's basically advertising space that we sell you, nothing else. The question is, how often are the rankings or the ratings updated? Ratings are valid for 3 years. So you would do it once every 3 years. The ranking, we would like to do it as an annual exercise. That's our goal. But let's see how it develops. It might, we might learn that doing the ranking surveys in November is not a great idea, and it's better to do it a few months later. So we might shift the date. And so we're not married to exactly those dates, but we would like to do it approximately once a year. Have this ranking like most other ranking agencies, so that you have an updated rolling process. Those are all the questions I can see in the Q&A. You can also raise hand. I don't see raised hands. And of course, you can also email ranking@appliedhe.org with any questions that you have. Oh, I see another question. Great. Okay. Oh, yeah. I saw in the chat, Tagalog. Yes, we're aware English is widely spoken in the Philippines. We're just putting it out there as an option. Okay, here's the next question. What if we do not have graduates in 2020 and 2021 because of the transition from a K to 12 year? Okay. Yeah. I'm aware of that. There was some transition in the Philippines. So then we would go back to 2019. That would be the graduating class we will be looking at. Yeah, so the most recent year for which you have graduates. Yeah. So this is always a challenge, right? Every country in ASEAN is different. How can we compare? We very much do our best to have comparable data. And yeah, this is an experiment to see how it goes. Okay. If that's all, I see another question, Miguel Carpio. Just curious, the university has a QS ranking already. What would be the advantage of going for the AppliedHE private university ranking? Well, I mean, this is something you need to decide for yourself, but in the QS ranking, most likely you're not number 1 or number 2, but maybe in the AppliedHE ASEAN university ranking you will be, right? Because it's a different set of competition. And I think if, as a university, just the more exposure you get, the better, right? It never hurts to be in another ranking. And also we try and give you back data from our ranking. So we're not yet, or well, no, we're not now selling you data about yourself. We're giving you a lot of free data. So even if you're using it as a kind of benchmarking insight, it can be very useful for that as well. And of course, the criteria are completely different, right? So QS has, I think, 50% is kind of international reputation. We don't really look at international reputation. And we look very heavily at teaching and learning, which they don't really look at. We do look a little bit at research from Google Scholar, and they look at Scopus. So it's really apples and oranges in many respects. So that's it. I see more questions coming in. So I'm going to go
Peter,
answer more questions.
Sorry, Peter. I also like to add for the QS ranking, they lump private and public universities together, whereas this is specifically only for private universities. So we are comparing apples to apples.
Yeah. Yes, that's very true too. Okay, I just kept going down the questions. How to save and retrieve data. I think you can, can I show that? Yeah, you can click resume. Oh, wait, let me, wait, it's a good question. Now I'm in the wrong window. I'm in the right window. Okay, let's see if we can do this. Here we go. So you can do resume later. It's at the top. And you can write a name, password, and your email address. I would just put the same email address, and then you can save it. Wait, what do I? Happy. Wait. And then I put my email address again, and then save now. And I believe you also get a message from us with that you have saved results. So that's how it, yeah, you can save. But sometimes if you hit refresh, it goes away. So what I highly recommend is that you, at the beginning of the survey and also on our registration page, if it will let me open that, you can see what data you need to submit, right? Institutional data. So just make sure you have this at hand before you start to enter the data. That's my personal advice, because saving on an online application is always a bit of a hassle. It's not always perfect. Okay, then there's a question from Ferdinand Nicolas. Okay, wait, let me stop sharing. Are rankings only regional, or will they be ranked by country as well? Well, you can always cut up our regional ranking into national rankings. So you can say, well, I'm maybe number 5 in ASEAN, but I'm number 2 nationally, or something like that. We are actually working on national rankings. And we're looking for partners for that as well. Mandy can speak about that more. But basically, the ASEAN ranking is kind of the pioneer framework for our new ranking approach, using these surveys, using Google Scholar, lots of innovative components. And what we want to do is we want to kind of apply that know-how to other countries for national rankings, either public and private separate or public and private combined. So if you as a university are very interested in supporting that, and by that we mainly mean kind of the promotional muscle and manpower to support us, because we can do the data gathering, we can do the processing, survey, data collection, blah, 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 but we are limited in our capabilities to try and roll out in every country at once. But I think after we've done our ASEAN private university ranking, it makes a lot of sense to look at national university rankings in ASEAN countries, because we've already gathered a lot of data for the private universities. So then it makes sense to include the public ones. Okay, you're very welcome for the clarification. There's also a question, will all universities who applied be ranked? Yes. Once you've applied, we will try to rank you. And you can't pull out. You can't say, oh, I wanted to be higher. You can't rank me anymore. So once you've submitted data, you will be ranked. We will most likely give you a pre-release and things like that, and you'll get detailed data about why you were ranked in a certain way. Yeah, but the nature is this is a ranking, so yeah, not everybody can be number one. So if that's a concern, you could seriously consider doing the job ready rating. And the reason we're saying that is because many institutions can be ranked top tier in the job ready rating. And so if you want to manage your kind of PR cycle, you can say, okay, we were ranked X, but we were also job ready rated Y around the same time. So that can be attractive. So that's why we're also offering it together. But in principle, every institution that submits data to us, we will rank them. If they don't submit data, you will not be ranked. That's how it works. Okay, no more questions popping up. No more raised hands. I think that's it.
You can always write to us if you have any afterthought.
Yeah.
We've got our emails.
So ranking@appliedhe.org. I'll just post it into the thing one last time. And yeah, and then we'll try and respond to you within a day or something like that. Okay. Yeah, that's it. Mandy, do you want to do the closing statements?
Oh, yes. I want to thank everyone for their participation. And I hope you're now clear on the methodology and goals of the AppliedHE Private University Ranking ASEAN. This is a great opportunity for private universities to shine, not only on the global stage, but also locally, as we aim to provide students, parents, employers, and other stakeholders with a reliable ranking that fits the private universities in the ASEAN region. And to enhance that further, and Peter mentioned it just now as well, please do consider the very, very competitive and very comprehensive global branding sponsorship we have in the ranking brochure that was sent out to all of you recently, or you can request for it if you have misplaced it. Meanwhile, please respond to Peter's email, and we aim to launch the AppliedHE Private University Ranking ASEAN in early 2022. On another note, just to remind you, please join us for our monthly webinars, the next Squaring the Circle debate, and also the last debate for the year is on the 3rd of November. That's on the first Wednesday of November, and it's at 8 p.m. Singapore time. The theme is Research is an Essential Aspect of All Universities. Sounds very exciting, doesn't it? Well, I hope to see all of you soon on the 3rd of November. Thank you very much, and bye for now.
If I may just extend into extra time, because I see two questions that popped up when you were talking. Yeah, it's officially ended. We're now in extra time. What is the ranking level? It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's a ranking. You will be ranked 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Of course, if you score the same, you'll have the same bracket. That's how it goes. Kartiga is asking for faculty and student numbers full time. Faculty members. So the faculty members that you have on your staff. And again, if they're part-time, 2 part-time is 1 full-time. That's that. Okay, we know somebody needs the tracer study. Okay, very good. Yeah, we will probably send people an email about that, because we kind of thought this wasn't going to be a thing, but it is going to be a thing. So we're working on that tracer study now, actually, and we'll send it out shortly, probably early next week. But please proceed with submitting your data. Okay, here's another great question. What is the basis for the 6-month employability indicator? In the Philippines, the priority of graduate of board programs after graduation is to prepare for licensure examinations, not employment. This is a great comment. This is a question from Lisa Ilagan. The reason we have done 6 months is because this is kind of the norm in many other countries. So if in Malaysia, in I believe Indonesia as well, the 6-month post-graduation requirement is the kind of the standard that's used, and that's why we've used it, because we were hoping many universities have that data and they can just share it with us and it's done. But if that's not the case, then it's a very good idea. What I would wonder about, though, is in principle we have three possible outcomes. We have possible outcome one, because we also accept further study. So if you go to our, wait, let me show you this in our survey for 1 second. Let me just see if I can go back to the, it's expired. Okay. No, then I'll just use fingers. So we have three possible outcomes after you graduate. One, you get a job. So that's after 6 months, we have one, you get a job. Two, you're pursuing further studies. So I'm assuming if somebody is studying for a licensure exam, that would fall under further study. I don't really see a problem with that. And then third option is unemployed, and then of course non-responsive to surveys, because we want to have an idea of what the response rate was of the surveys. So those are the three options. But since we will, yeah, it's a very interesting question. I would assume that we would say that these students are doing further study. But if you have a strong opinion about this, I highly encourage you to write to us as well, because this is a very good question, and we need, of course, solve this. What my question back is what percentage of, I mean, of course, not all degrees would have a licensure exam, I would assume. So if you don't have a licensure exam, then you probably enter the employment market within 6 months, would be my assumption. This is also a very true point, that the employment rates of different countries will play a role. Yes, this is also true. However, we assume that the employment rate for private universities will be relatively high, because students are actually paying for their degree. So they wouldn't want to pay for a degree where they wouldn't get employment. But it's a reasonable comment, and I will take it back to the ranking advisory board as well. And we also need to look at a little bit how the statistics comes back. If we see, for instance, that all Philippine institutions score way lower than the ASEAN average, we need to maybe rethink this. If that's not really the case, then perhaps it's not as much an issue. That's something we're going to find out, and we will definitely discuss with the ranking advisory board. So thank you for bringing that up. Okay, I would now like to call an end to overtime. We're not going to go to a penalty shootout. Thank you again for attending. Please drop us a line if you have more questions or comments. It's very welcome. Thank you.